following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Dan Rylance. A couple weeks back we had on Terry Labe from Labe Restoration. He was talking about the East Side Water Tower and why he feels it should be preserved. That is an issue that's coming back before the Oshkosh Common Council sometime in the next few weeks probably. This evening on this show, we're joined by two members of the Oshkosh Landmarks Commission. To my left is Harold Buchholz, and he is the chairman of that commission. And of course, you all recognize Burk Tower from the Oshkosh Common Council. He's the council member on the Landmarks Commission. So thanks very much to both of you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Fun to be here.
We want to talk a little bit more about the tower and what's going on. The commission will be presenting a workshop to the council on, I believe, the 27th of this month.
Well, it's not really from the commission point. It's basically a workshop that the council has asked to do, and it's open to the public, and we will definitely attend that workshop, and that's next Tuesday.
Actually, it's the workshop itself is on the 20th, which is next Tuesday, which is coming up, which will be probably the night after.
Okay, all right.
Tonight's show.
Okay. Yeah, because this will air next week, so this will air one time before that workshop goes on. So anyway, I guess, you know, before we get into the meat of your special meeting on the 27th of February, talking about the tower, Harold, if you just kind of want to give us a little bit of a recap on the history. I know Terry Labe did that when he was here, but in case someone didn't see that show or whatever, maybe, you know, just hit some of the highlights about the history.
I'm sure Terry's a much better historian than I am, but if we could maybe just show the photograph, I'll just kind of go to my notes and give a little background summary history of that. What we're going to look at is a newspaper article. I don't know what the date is of it. It might have been the Northwestern, but it describes a new filtration plant having been constructed in 1916 and was designed by Colonel Henry Allen, who also was a consulting engineer for Chicago Public Works as well. So he has some experience in sort of water filtration plants. The resident engineer was a B.J. Jorgensen. I don't know much about him, but pretty much it was his charge to take care and do all the details of the construction of the water treatment plant. And at that time, the plant was basically described as the latest and the most modern type in the United States, with several new features particularly designed for the Oshkosh plant. The tower, and of course this will be our point of interest today, included a 50,000-gallon steel water tank for basically used for washing the filter sand out of each of the filter beds that are on that site. The plant was also equipped with a complete laboratory for analyzing water samples every day to ensure the purity of the water and keeping bacteriological issues at bay. And it's also had an operating gallery which was supposedly beautifully designed with marble operating tables and white enameled brick railing. So that's pretty much what I know. Is we're still looking at that photograph. That tower originally also had a clock in it on all four sides, which has been replaced by a light, and that'll probably come up in conversation as we move down the path of tonight anyways.
Sure,
Question
that's the beacon?
Yeah, excuse me. Chronology. You said that it was built in 1915 and 1916?
1916.
The tower itself?
Yes.
Okay, Terry Labe last week said the tower was built for a WPA project in 1935, 1936. So we have a difference of
And again,
20 years.
Yep, I'm referring to the article that we're basically seeing the photograph on, and that's
so the article photograph is
that's
1960.
Yep.
Okay, well, 2 days.
Now, when that photo was taken, that's maybe that's the difference. Maybe
Okay.
we're seeing that this photo was actually taken in 1930s, you're
35,
saying?
36, the
35?
WPA project is what Terry
Okay.
told us last week.
All right.
Okay, just so we,
So yeah, I don't want to mislead that. I'm just going to
Okay.
basically quote what that article was saying
Sure.
in terms of the construction of the plant.
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay?
All right, good. Well, we know that a special meeting was held on February 27th to talk about what to do with the tower. And, you know, you had a chance to come down to City Hall and actually
Right.
take a look at the physical, the hard copy minutes. I tried to find them online, and it's a little disturbing because online you can't find them. They're just not there, and I'm not sure why. What was there was the agenda for that special meeting. And I don't know, I mean, Burk, maybe you can answer this since you're on the council, but the agenda, for anyone looking at it, they would have no idea that this was a meeting to talk about the water tower at all. It's got your standard stuff called order, roll call, and then background information / SHPO opinion. I have no idea what SHPO means.
That's the State Historic Preservation Officer.
Okay, all right. And then reasons for the proposed demolition, alternatives to demolition, maintenance versus demolition, and sustainability issues, public comment, action plan, adjournment. Again, if you don't know what SHPO means, you have no idea what this means at all. And it still doesn't say anything about the tower. So, you know, maybe just a suggestion for staff, maybe they could just, you know, be a little bit
better
more
job.
clear in putting together agendas.
And that's a good point.
Particularly an area we're trying to do with the council, and we have to do it throughout. That was a quickly called meeting. There were
Sure.
some members of the commission that said we really want to have a quick meeting, so I think some people put it together quickly, but I think we have to exercise more care.
Oh,
there,
yeah,
too.
absolutely.
So, point well taken.
But for those of us who didn't see the minutes or who weren't at the meeting, you know, what kinds of things were discussed as far as alternatives to tearing down the tower and actually preserving it? And by the way, something has to be done because the lift, some of the mechanicals underneath the tower are not up to DNR codes right now, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Basically what happened at that meeting was that Mr. Patek and Mr. Brand came in and basically presented the project to us and laid out the scope of, starting with the basis, first of all, that they never considered the saving of the tower to begin with. The project never considered that and never was a consideration for them. As we started getting some ideas from them or some information from them regarding cost of demolition, cost of rehabilitation, cost of the project in total, we started asking those questions. Well, are those good costs, accurate costs? Because they were pretty high. They ranged anywhere from $350,000 to over $1 million. And so some of our questioning related to getting more precise on the cost, especially if now considering maybe that the tower should be saved, what would be that cost? And so we were having quite a bit of exchange on that matter and weren't getting very far in that. We also started then exchanging ideas about alternative uses, utilities for readaptive use. What have you considered any readaptive use for that? And they did not. And so pretty much that meeting just brought us to the stage of, well, this has been a project that DNR said we had to comply with because of the high lift and low lift pumps. The low lift pump is the one that's under the tower and needs to be brought above grade. The high lift pump is next to the tower, and so that would also affect the tower if they had to replace that. So under those guidelines and those parameters, they felt they have no other choice but to take the tower down in order to comply with that DNR regulation.
Okay.
I just enhance it by a couple of things. I did a pretty nice description of what we actually did then, but I think it ought to be recognized that the idea to do some work out there existed before the DNR came in. It was not a DNR-motivated project. The project was looked at as some enhancements to the actual water plant itself to improve the sediment control, to improve filtration, a number of pieces of machinery that were there were suffering from deterioration, so there was a project. The project was all put together by January of 2007, and when it was submitted to the DNR with a plan, and the original plan actually was to keep the tower and to do the enhancements with the tower in place and underneath, and the DNR did not accept the plans as laid out. They said, well, we will you cannot, the two pumping systems had issues with respect to DNR. You were going to have to, you couldn't just simply work on it there. So in 2007, it took a little different twist. The tower became an issue in 2007
Okay.
at that point in time because you weren't going to be able to retain it the same way. That was.
Okay. Do we know, I mean...
Let me add to
Sure,
that,
go ahead.
Cheryl. We missed the one part, which is this 50,000 gallon tank that's in the tower, again, under the DNR and our 811 or whatever the ruling was that they had. They needed to bring that to capacity of 750,000 gallons, and so that was another reason that Public Works feels that the tower needs to be basically brought down and replaced.
Okay. You cited, Harold, some numbers here, quite a big range of what it would cost to tear the tower down. Do we now know how much it would cost to keep it up?
We don't. That's one of the contentions we've had, and based on the the special meeting, both Mr. Patek and Mr. Brand appeared. The following meeting of our regular Landmarks Commission meeting, they also appeared, and we still were not able to get very specifics and detailed breakdowns of the cost so that we could understand exactly what is the cost for rehabilitation, what is the cost for saving, what is the cost of demolition. And so what we've asked is that those numbers be clarified, and I guess as we talked about, there's an upcoming workshop that the Common Council will be having next Tuesday where we expect to get some of that clarification.
Okay.
A little bit on the methodology and the numbers.
Sure.
The numbers that they gave us at that meeting and the follow-up meeting essentially were numbers that were updated from 2003. In 2003, it was decided some work had to be done, an engineering study was done. The engineering company made some estimates. They said to upgrade it with the tower in place, it cost like $700,000 in 2008 dollars, and if you tore it down, it would cost $200 and some odd thousand. So they were saying that there's a $500,000 difference at that. The concern of the commission was those were done at that point in time, and so this was mainly a extrapolation of those numbers, number one. The point that they made was that they really didn't talk recently about what it would take to save the tower under today's conditions, and so I thought there ought to be a new set of numbers. That was also brought up in the council, so the council asked that we get some numbers that are updated and would look at options for saving the tower, and that's what the workshop will be on Tuesday night, the 20th, will be presentation of options.
Sure. Who are they going to get these numbers then, Burk?
I assume that they'll do their engineering, the engineering people. I don't know exactly, but they were asked to go back and get numbers. I'm sure they've talked to the engineering companies that did it before and maybe do some construction companies.
I want to back up to sort of a chronology. I ran your minutes all for 2007, and there's no mention of the water tower in any of your minutes. And Terry Labe said that the tower was eligible for the National Register, but the Commission, Landmark Commission, has never been interested in the tower, have they, in terms of preserving it?
Well, there's a huge gap from the time that the DNR came in with their sanitary survey and presented it to Public Works, which my earliest date of that is April of 2007, and then they made a presentation to the Common Council, the DNR survey might have been January of 2007. They presented to the Common Council, I think in April of 2007. The Landmarks Commission did not really get wind of that, so to speak, until the early part of 2008, when actually Shirley Maddox, one of our commission members, brought it to our attention, and then it made the agenda for February of 2008. That's when we first really took it on.
I think in fairness to your comment, you were asking,
Yeah.
indeed, in the 1980s it was identified as, or 1970s, 1980s,
Right.
it was identified as being eligible.
Right.
We've asked that question of
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Why didn't we do it? And
That was-
I don't know the answer.
That was
Well,
Terry Labe's, one of his questions
I mean,
last week, is if
that
you're
goes back
eligible,
over a
why-
number of years.
why isn't it?
I can address that to some aspect. There was a survey in 1978 done by HNTB, and they identified the Washington District and the water filtration plant as eligible for listing in the National Register. In 1985, I believe, the Washington District actually was listed, and either by oversight or by design, it was chosen to leave the water filtration plant off that district
Okay.
as far as getting it registered on the National Register. And it could be because of the different uses. One is the public utility, and the other private residences. So that's pretty much where Now, who fell down, where did
Yeah,
it
yeah.
fall down? We can't blame the past, either the
Right.
city staff or administration or the Landmarks Commission at that time, or even the Common Council, because I can refer to this a little later as to what the process is to actually do some other things that the Landmarks Commission can do.
Okay, at your February 18th meeting, your regular meeting, you instructed the staff to contact the Wisconsin Historical Society for evaluation of the historical significance of the tower.
Correct.
See if it had any historical value and report back to you. Have you heard anything from them?
Yes, mostly through emails with the State Historic Preservation Officer and city staff, city planning staff. And their opinion was that the DNR order or directive had no direction to tear the tower down. There was not part of the DNR mandate or directive.
Okay. Meaning that they're in support of preserving it, or?
They are also, the State Preservation Officer also said that it is one of those unique items or unique structures in Wisconsin that it would have an easy time, relative easy time being listed on the National Register because of its massive structure and its architecture. That was his opinion.
Okay.
That would be the State Historic Preservation
Okay,
Officer.
what I really get confused of, the February 28th special meeting, I don't have any minutes at, but in your minutes of March 12th, your regular meeting, here's what you say in your minutes. Following discussion with staff, the commission concluded that there appeared to be no viable alternative to demolition. Is that where the commission is at in this? That there is no alternative to destroying it?
There was no practical, up to that particular meeting, there was no practical solution brought forth. We had brought some suggestions in that February 27th meeting to even say, well, have you considered rebuilding the tower in some sort of smaller version? At least you would save some of the brick, the green use of bricks and the architecture of that. And again, Public Works pretty much has said, we never considered saving the tower, so we really weren't getting a good exchange on other utilities or readaptive uses of the tower.
I think what you're seeing here is a need as we go forward to handle these things in a different way. One of the other things that came out of that meeting was I'd indicated at that time, I think we need to make this part of a workshop with sustainability. As we go into sustainability, we think historical preservation ought to be part of sustainability, but we also recognize that we're going to have to give some definition to this and develop some protocols so that this doesn't happen again, because there have been a number of things connected to this. In hindsight, you say, gee, I wish we had done this or they had done that, but you can pretty well understand how everybody did what they did as they moved along through the process. So how do we improve it? So
I suspect there
That's
was
a good
no
point.
citizen member other than the commission at that special meeting. It was really easy for the head of Public Works to come down and lay out his case. But Terry Labe probably would have laid out an entirely different case if he would have been there, right? I mean, it was not a balanced meeting, was it?
Well, I'll beg to differ a little bit with that. It was balanced in terms of that our basis for being there was the preservation of the tower, and I guess what at that point it was the awareness to Public Works that this is a historic structure, which they basically never undertook in their estimation.
So you conveyed that to them?
That is correct.
Okay, well that's...
And so where we are today really is to say, look, okay, you didn't maybe know it was a historic structure then, but you do now.
Okay.
And so now you have to do a couple of things a little better than what you've done.
Okay.
And I can elaborate on that as well if your questions lead that way. Or
Okay, one more. Then you go to your April 9th meeting and you're into bricks. The building is going down according kind of to your March 12th. So you want to get a hold of a local salvage company that will come in who's experienced with brick salvage. And so I guess you're going to, if the tower goes, we're going to get the bricks. Is that?
what? Right.
Who's going to get the bricks?
Well, we would hope they would never
Come to that point. I understand.
To that.
Okay.
I think that was the last exchange that the commission basically threw out in the desperation of the eventuality that Public Works seemed to be going to that direction, that the cost of rehabilitation of the tower was, again, anywhere between $300,000 and over $1 million, and we were basically told, well, those would probably be if we did try to save the tower, those would definitely be reflected in utility bills to residents, and where are we going to come up with money of those kinds to save the tower? So the commission was looking at all this economic side of what the project was, and we're trying to say, well, it's historic, try to save it. Have you looked at other readaptive uses? And so it was really that exchange that kind of became the awakening, I think, for Public Works as well, to say, okay, maybe this wasn't looked at in that regard, and we need to.
Right.
I hope that's what they're thinking.
Going back to the workshop meeting, I think the workshop meeting was really set up to also acquaint the commission with what was going on. In other words, somehow or another decided that Shirley had said, we need to find out what's going to go on. So it called and asked for it, and they came and did a PowerPoint on what the kind of the history of the project was and where they stood. And then it really wasn't a Save the Tower meeting per se. It was what's going on, and then what do we do after that? And that was the reason for some follow-up discussion at the next meeting.
Okay, so for viewers watching this, what is the status of this potential recommendation for demolition? Is it open, back on the table, yet no decision made?
Well, the council put it back on the table, because ultimately the council will have to make the decision on
okay.
this. I mean, the commission can become an advocate for historical preservation. If you look at their role, they really don't have a decision on this. It is not landmarked. If it was landmarked, there is a protocol to go through, but there's no protocol out there at this point.
I understand that.
So the council, I think, in response to a number of people who called very passionately and wrote some letters, said we want a little more information, and they weren't as happy with the financial information. So they said, well, we'd like some more information. We'd like some alternatives presented to us. So the council said, we're open. So what will happen is there will be a workshop in which additional information will be presented. It is open to the public, as we've begun to make our workshops on a regular basis now, for the council to listen both to people, and then I'm sure it will come back to the council. So it's open. It'll be a workshop gathering information, probably some discussion on the 20th, and then possibly on the 27th or later, depending on what the council says at that meeting. It'll come back to the council, and as usual, it'll see where four votes are. I mean, that's where the final decision will be.
Is the position of the Landmark Commission, are you going to have a position at the workshop? Are you going to say, we want this tower preserved?
We're going to basically push Public Works into making a decision or presenting the project in light of all the elements regarding the community, the value of life, historic preservation, to not just make this just a project which is an upgrade project of the water filtration plant, but look at all the elements, which includes the preservation aspect of it, which includes the residents of that neighborhood, which includes the largest public support for this that I've seen so far has basically been the tower as a navigation point for boaters on Winnebago and to warn of thin ice and to the mouth of the Fox River. There was also somewhat of a breach of trust, supposedly, in that in the 70s maybe the water works director at that point had made some indication that any upgrades of that filtration plant would not necessarily mean that the tower was coming down, and so residents in that area actually feel that their trust has been broken because of that. And so again, we are going to go in there and say, you need to look at all the elements, you need to present them correctly and accurately. And then again, as Mr. Towers said, the decision is going to be that of the Common Council. We don't have that authority. We're an advisory.
Because really the role of a commission, if you go back and look at the role, is become an advocate for historical preservation and to make the argument. Historical preservation has to be considered here. Ultimately, the council has responsibility for rates and some balancing. And so that's really not a bottom line responsibility of the commission. So I sit on the commission in one way, and then I come to the council, and my criteria will be very different at that point in time, because I'll be concerned with functionality.
We typically don't sit this close as our commission.
We do normally. I don't know an issue like this.
One of the things, Burk, when this came before the Common Council the first time, I think some councilors were a little bit taken aback anyway by the fact that they indicated that they weren't aware that they were going to be voting on actually tearing the tower down. Now, I was talking to someone yesterday who said that he clearly remembered a workshop from a year or so ago where the demolition of the tower was in fact discussed. And you had sort of talked a little bit about that when this was before the council the first time. And I guess, you know, the only thing that I could say in defense of some of the council members is some of them are new to the council. They wouldn't have been serving on the council when this workshop had first taken place. Would that be correct? correct?
No, this was last summer. It was on July 24th.
Okay.
So
See,
everybody,
he indicated that it was like a year or so ago.
last
So-
summer, last summer was actually on July 24th. And they did come before. I think sometimes it's hard when you go through those workshops. There are a lot of things, and quite frankly, historical preservation has not been at the top of the thinking process when you do that, so you sort of forget. They even have the pictures. Yes, they came, and we got a copy of that, and actually they said the first line talks about the demolition of aspects of the plant and the tower, and we actually have pictures here in which they show what the plant's going to look like before. And then they go through 5 pictures in which they show the tower is down, and it was talked why the tower is coming down, because the tower is no longer a necessary part. The tower was still serving a function as of last year. It was used as a backwash. Under the new process, it won't be needed, and so that was why they were recommending. So clear, but it's hard to remember that. The thing that was a little confusing is a couple of months before our meeting there, we were aware that it was coming down because we had folks from the Outer Street Fishing Club who came and presented an impassioned argument indicating that because the tower was coming down, they wanted some concern with the light, and the council instructed the city to work with them to figure out an alternative for the light because it's near the mouth of the river. And in fact, there had been it's my understanding, there had been agreement worked out in terms of light being put on another building. Now, whether or not that's sufficient or not sufficient, but we clearly talked about the tower coming down and the need to come up with a light. Now, do you remember all those things? Or, I mean, as I say, I think you can kind of understand, you can rationalize everybody's sort of position where they come from, and our question is, how do we do these things better without pointing fingers all the way across the board? All of us have a piece of that.
That's where we have somewhat of a point of contention, because the Landmarks Commission never saw any of that, never saw anything until, again, Shirley Maddox came into us in early February of maybe it was January 2008, that we first hear that there were plans to demolish the water treatment plant. So, I know you kind of picked on the minutes, and I agree, the points you made are certainly valid, but if you look at workshop announcements and things, again, would I know those if Burk hadn't told me there was going to be a workshop next Tuesday regarding the water treatment plant? So again, it's a public awareness. How do we get more of that? How do we make the connections between when those issues are first brought to the table, that maybe the preservation and landmarks could actually get involved in some of those things?
Sure.
So we know that's a gap.
Well, we're just about out of time here for this segment, but one thing that was suggested to me by someone was that, you could preserve the tower, but not in its exact location. Maybe move it just a little bit, one way or the other, probably to the north into the park a little bit. You can still save the tower, and you could take up a private endowment type arrangement to preserve it. And I would even go one step further from that, is I would say, whatever money you'd be spending on demolishing it, the city kick in that portion of the money, and then, we're always talking about public-private partnerships, the city kick in what it would cost to demolish it, and private contributions take up the difference, and that way you can still preserve it.
I just have 2 comments on that, because that's one of the options that will be presented. I believe that's going to be an option. I think you're going to find the dollar level to be pretty high, and I don't think the dollars to demolish will do it. So I think you're talking about a strong private contribution. If we think about the Cole Bassford House, and we listened to Mr. Labe last week, the private sector so far, I think, it's going to be a difficult thing to do. I think that's an option, and I think that ought to be on the table. Sure. I don't disagree with that at all. Nope. I think it's not going to be an easy option, and we're going to have to separate city tax dollars from water rate payers, because remember, this is utility. So this is the water rate which we on the council pushed the public works to be very careful with their dollars at the last increase.
Okay.
And this is why the cost detail has always been such a contention, because again, the cost of demolition was one number, the cost of restructuring or rebuilding was another number. We even brought that proposal of smaller size tower, maybe of a similar, using the similar brick structure, but just smaller in nature, so to cut the cost. But again, we couldn't get a good feel for those costs.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens when the workshop is held. So anyway, thanks to both of you for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Winnebago County Sheriff Mike Brooks. We'll be right back.
just escape.
I escaped
I escape.
by foot.
Run across a border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're very happy to be joined now by Winnebago County Sheriff Mike Brooks. We're just going to talk about a number of different issues going on within the county jail and the criminal defense system and the criminal justice system and what have you.
Sure.
So one of the first things I wanted to talk about was at budget time last year, we had heard that by, I think it was 2011, our jail was going to be pretty much maxed out. And, you know, there's been some talk about what to do, you know, expand it, because it was built, it was designed and built to be able to be expanded with your pod system and so forth. There's also been some talk about, you know, consolidation or regionalization with the Outagamie County Jail and the Calumet County Jail. Where are we at with respect to these conversations and the maxing out of our current jail?
Well, sure. Well, let me start out first of all by saying that right today we have 31 state inmates, and our population today was 337. We can hold at 100% capacity 355 inmates. The problem with that is once you get above, and depending on how the jail's configured, anywhere from 80 to 90%, you lose your ability to start housing people based on their classification. And that becomes a problem, because if you're not housing them in the right spot, you're housing them with the wrong group of people, you open the door to a liability lawsuit. So for all intents and purposes, we are already overcrowded. Now, some of it is artificial because we do have some state prisoners, but we have been trying to keep that number right around this 335 in order to make sure that we have some movement for classification. As far as our facility, the core areas will house up to another about 450 inmates. And when I say core areas, I'm referring to the kitchen facility, the property room, the sizing of the booking area, etc. So if we can build onto there to meet our own needs, then that's great. One of the big misunderstandings that the members of the community have is that they get the impression I'm saying, let's build this just so we can house prisoners for other counties. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're going to have a need. If we have a need, then we need to say, do we really want those beds sitting empty, or do we want to bring in some revenue as the result of having those beds? You can't build a facility or add on to a facility to be filled the day you take occupancy. We saw that didn't work when we had the study done in 1999 that said, here's the numbers, here's what you'll be in about 2008, 2009, and that turned out to be accurate. And here we are 5 years after we open up this facility, we're already overcrowded. As it relates to the ad hoc, I'm very much in favor of these conversations. I do believe that, in speaking to Sheriff Gehring, that it's more likely that Outagamie and Winnebago will be able to work something out. Our needs are greater than what Calumet counties are right now. But there's a lot of little things that we have to be concerned about. The first one is, under the current Wisconsin statutes, whoever has the jail in their county, they are in total control of that facility. So it becomes a rental agreement, much like we had with Dane County, much like we have with the state of Wisconsin. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but from my point of view, if it was in Outagamie County, it would make me a little nervous as far as depending on that being my long-term solution. Unless there was some type of change in the legislation that would guarantee me of this being a long-term solution, I would be very, very uncomfortable, because a new sheriff can come in and say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want those prisoners here, and then you got to start finding another place. And here we are 2, 3, 4 years down the line when everything's going to cost more. So I think we need to be looking at a solution that will require some legislative change. Now, for example, Milwaukee has a House of Corrections, and there's very specific legislation that says that they can have this. There isn't any legislation on the books that allows 2 or 3 or 4 counties to go together and do this. Well, maybe it's time to do that. I've had conversations with Senator Ressler. I had conversations with Assemblyman Hentz about this, and both of them are very interested. And of course, now Senator Ressler retiring won't be as large a player, but people I'm talking to are very interested in finding ways to make this work. Now, there is one other caveat to this, and this is the biggest caveat, is we also have to be worried about the caps that the state has been putting on us, because for one county to undertake this entire project could force us to be above our cap limit, and we can't do that. So not only do you need the legislative change that allows you to join together, but you need the state to recognize these partnerships and somehow work some legislation that doesn't penalize the host county for doing this.
If there were to be a regionalization, now you're talking just Outagamie and Winnebago, that kind of leaves Calumet out of the discussion as far as what we're talking about right now. But if there were to be that, then you'd be, you're going to have the same number of inmates. Do you need the same staffing that each individual one currently has? And also then you're driving up other costs too, because you're going to have to transport, somebody's going to have to transport from an area, so they're going to have increased costs.
Yep. You've done your homework very well.
Well, not really, that's just common sense, but thank you.
Well, and because those are some of the issues. Let me deal first with the transport one, and then we'll go to the staffing issue. Both Outagamie, Sheriff Gehring and I talked about this 6, 7 years ago already, and we went together, and there was a study done by the National Institute of Corrections, who at that time said it doesn't make sense for you guys to do that. You need your own facilities because of all the transportation costs to and from court. Video conferencing with the courts doesn't alleviate that need. It helps reduce it, but it doesn't alleviate it. But in this situation, both of us are already at that size where we would be able to start filling up pods with sentenced prisoners, those individuals that make the trip once in each direction. They're not going to court every day or once or twice a week or once a month. They're sentenced, they just have to do their time. So in that case, the transportation costs become significantly lower. As it relates to the staffing level, one of the big issues as it relates to what Winnebago, when we were first looking at what Winnebago County should do, we looked at the old Huber Center, because when I closed that down, the question is, what are you going to do with that building? And so we took a look at that. We had an architect firm come in, and they estimated roughly $2.5 million to turn it into a 144-bed facility. That's, as you and I both know, the life cycle costs are what really kill you. It's the construction costs are what everybody hears, but it's the life cycle costs. That facility, because it is a separate facility, would require us to duplicate administrative staff, duplicate security staff, and duplicate supervisors. If we can add on to our facility, and now I'm just talking about us in our conversations, If we add on to our current facility, we reduce the staff level by 7. 17 for the old Huber Center, 10 for the same amount of beds if we add on 2 pods. So there are ways that you can address this, and you have to. You have to take a look at those life cycle costs. Now, and I don't want to give you the wrong impression when I say, for all intents and purposes, Calumet's not in the loop at this point. They're going to continue on in the conversations. While things may be good today, that doesn't mean they're good tomorrow.
Sure.
And so we recognize that if we're going to look at regionalization, we need to include them in it. One of the questions that often gets asked me is, well, what about other counties? And currently, you're not seeing the need for beds in some of the other counties like Outagamie and Winnebago have right now. But additionally, once again, if they don't have the sentenced prisoners that they can house in a regionalized facility, which is what the House of Corrections is, by the way, if you don't have that number of inmates to house in there, then you're doing this transport back and forth all the day, and it becomes extremely labor intensive, and at $4 a gallon, it's expensive.
Yeah. So,
while at this point we may not see any additional interest from other surrounding counties, but I would think this is a very worthwhile project just to show how 2 of probably the oldest institutions or oldest elected positions can work together to solve a problem for the community.
Okay.
You know, Fox River Valley would be 4 counties on this side.
Mm-hmm.
That's way beyond feasibility.
At this point, most likely. Fond du Lac County is in the process of adding on, or has just added on. Brown County has a facility that they built out for 20 years. They still have a lot of empty beds. But once again, nothing we do today should prevent us from being able to work together in the future. And so, I'm not going to be around to see it, but I think that my successor will probably start having conversations along those lines.
Reorganization takes a long time, particularly when you got statutory changes.
Yes.
And I mean, it just isn't going to happen quickly.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Do you want to keep going to the jail and move somewhere else? Or?
No, we can go on to other things. I mean, unless there was something else, Sheriff, that you wanted to mention about that.
No, just to add on that we have another meeting August 21st, and we are looking at the legislative changes, and the 3 counties have assigned their jail administrators to sit down and come up with an RFP to get a consultant in to help us with this project.
Okay.
I have an essay question.
Okay.
It's 2-part.
Okay.
Why are you not running for re-election of Sheriff of Winnebago County, and why have you dropped out of running for the Republican primary for the Senate seat of retiring Senator Carol Gessler?
Okay, I'll answer the first one, and the second one I'll tell you is of a personal nature.
Okay.
And so
All right.
I won't
Okay.
answer that.
All right.
But the first one is I've been in law enforcement at the sheriff's office since October of 1972. 36 years. At the end of this term, I'll have nearly 40 years at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. I'll be 60 and a half years old. I jokingly tell people it's time for me to go out and find honest work, in the private sector. But there comes a time for change, and I really am at the point where I think I've been able to accomplish a lot of things. I'm still eager to take on some of the projects that we have going, but there comes a time when everybody benefits from change, and I think that's the time for me to
I think that's
leave.
the answer for
Yeah.
this. I think change is,
Yeah.
as you get older,
Yeah.
you look for different things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any thoughts about what you might want to do?
The only thing I will say for sure is whatever I do, I want to still deal with people. I like working with people. I enjoy. My wife sometimes doesn't like going to the grocery store with me because what should be a half-hour trip takes an hour and 15 minutes because I like to talk to people. So I'm looking for something where I can still talk to people, whether it be working in a pro shop at a golf course or working some type of retail, but something where I still get to interact with people.
So you'd leave law enforcement altogether?
Yeah, I would like to try to do something different. I would like to take the skills sets that I've learned and transfer them. I think the interpersonal skills is one that I could make work for me, but I'm looking for something. My wife will be working for about another 8-9 years, and She's already made it very clear that I will be working as long as she is. I'm kidding when I say that, but I'm not the type of person that could just stop working. I have to have something else to do.
Sure, sure.
So.
Was it not your predecessor, Sheriff, who, when he left office, did he not go into private investigation? And he since has passed away.
Yes, yes, he has. Sheriff Kraus went into, he did a multitude of different things. He served legal papers, he did private investigations for some of the attorneys in the area, accident investigations and criminal investigations. He did that for quite a few years, when unfortunately he passed away from Agent Orange just a couple years ago. So,
a Vietnam veteran? Or?
Yes, he was, and very sad. He was a very young man. He was only 2 years older than I am. So.
Yeah. So that something like that has no interest to you at all? You just want to get out of it altogether and do something totally different?
Yeah, well, I really do want to do something different. Who knows what doors will open up? You know, it's very difficult for me at times to explain to people that my skill set is transferable. And let me use as an example. I was talking to a friend who's a very good salesman, and I had said to him, you know, I wouldn't mind selling, you know, when I get out. And he says, well, geez, you don't have any experience. And I said, well, I disagree. I've been selling to the community. I've been selling to the county board. I've been selling to the people I work with. And I probably had the hardest sales job for a significant period of time when I was in the Detective Bureau, and that was selling people that honesty was the best policy when all they got out of it was jail time. And so, you know, I do believe I have a lot of skills that would translate into the private sector. It's just a matter of finding something that will be a good fit for them and for me.
Sure. Well, I want to go back to some of the things with respect to the jail now. You're currently housing some state inmates.
That's correct.
One question that came to mind, I mean, when I think about state inmates, I think of a little bit more hardened criminal necessarily than what we're sometimes seeing in a jail. I realize a lot of it's time that they're sentenced to serve,
right.
You know, but you know, we see some more hardcore type criminals in state institutions. Are there different types of criteria that a county jail must meet to house a state prisoner because of some of those types of issues, or is it just this classification type thing where you have to keep like inmates together? How does that work?
Well, actually, I think, first of all, I think as you somewhat alluded to, all state prisoners come through county jails first. So, you know, we do have experience dealing with somebody that has much more involvement, or has had much more involvement in criminal activity than some of the people we have. And and the reason I say that is, you know, our society is pretty good at trying to help people on the front end and see if they can prevent them from recommitting crimes, and it doesn't work. So a lot of times, by the time you go to prison, you've you know, had somewhat of a history. When it comes to the selection of the inmates that come to us, the state of Wisconsin is pretty good at giving us individuals that will fit into our needs. And we're not looking at high-risk classification, we're looking at medium. The other thing is there is more incentive for them to behave themselves in our facility than there is for the average inmate, in that they've got a long time to do, and they start getting conduct reports, things get a lot harder for them. Also, this is a concept that some people have trouble buying into, but the reality of it is, if you're in jail awaiting sentencing, there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of stress involved in that, and to be quite frank with you, we have more problems with those type of inmates than we do with the individual who is sentenced. He knows he's got to do X amount of time, and he's just doing his time and trying to stay out of trouble. So I'm not saying that there aren't some minor differences that we need to deal with, but actually it works a lot easier sometimes with the state prisoners than it does with county prisoners.
Okay. Well, you've tried, you know, you've brought about some creative ways, I think, to deal with overcrowding issues and saving costs and that kind of thing. GPS was one of them. Day reporting has recently started.
Yes.
For our viewers who may not know what day reporting is, maybe you can just kind of give us a brief explanation of what it is and tell us how it's working?
Sure, sure. Day reporting is a, for us older Americans, in the 70s it was called rehabilitative day reporting. And really what it is what we're trying to do, if you put somebody in jail, you put them on GPS, really all you're doing is warehousing them. If we're going to be effective in reducing the need for beds down the line, because we just can't afford to keep building jails, we need to start doing something about the root issues of recidivism. How do we find out what's causing this individual to reoffend? And so day reporting is geared towards dealing with the inmates after we have a screening tool to say this is a individual that we may be able to work with. We get them involved in the different types of programs. They are responsible to meet with a counselor from day reporting, and the whole idea really is to try and get them to prevent them from reoffending. Right now we only have slightly less than 10 individuals that are on the day reporting. Our goal is to end up with something more in the area of 20 to 25. That is the back end component of it. On the front end, we find that a lot of people with mental health issues that get arrested end up missing court appearances, end up having additional problems, and a lot of times it's just because somebody hasn't taken the time to sit down and explain to them what they need to do, when they need to be there, make sure that there's a call to come in. On the front end, they'll help with that. They'll also help with and when I say they'll help with that, instead of placing that individual in the jail, because it's always very discouraging to see individuals in our facility that have mental health issues. We are not the right place to house them. And so the day reporting has been very successful in other communities in helping allow them to stay in their house and at the same time making sure that they're abiding by the bond that they're out on and making their court appearances. We're also looking at some individuals who the courts are going to say, okay, you know, I want to still keep tabs on you, and the bond would be $1,000, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to order you to participate in day reporting, and it may be something as simple as just the fact that you have to check in with them, or it could be, but you're not in jail then, or it may be the case where the court says I want an assessment done, and you know, we'll go from there as far as any programs that they're needed. So the whole idea behind it really is to reduce jail population on the front end immediately, but also to work at reducing recidivism, so we reduce jail population on the you know, later on. So I think it'll be very successful. It has been in other communities.
Okay.
A couple of general questions.
Sure.
Is it time to quit electing judges? We're one of only 2 countries in the Western world that elect our judges. The last 2 Supreme Court races have been obscene. They've been auctions, and the candidate who spends the most money to say he's harder in crime or she's harder in crime wins the race. Mm-hmm. Is that a good way to deal with this?
Well, I don't know that I'm really qualified professionally to give you an opinion on that, but let me give you my personal opinion as to the last 2 Supreme Court races. I was appalled by both of them. One of the individuals I was supporting, I called him and said, take my name off your endorsement. And he said, well, I'm not the one doing that. And I said, but you haven't distanced yourself from it. So I really am concerned about the negative ads that were going on. The problem is we're seeing that in all campaigns anymore. And let me just digress for a second. The newspaper ran a story, how come people aren't running for office? And I read the blogs, and the blogs were saying, geez, you know, that's because nobody wants to be under scrutiny. Well, I've been doing it for 13 years. I don't mind being under scrutiny. I don't like the personal attacks. Mm-hmm. Don't attack me personally. Don't attack my family personally. Don't blog with profanity, etc. Mm-hmm. That's what discourages people. That's the type of negative campaigning that I did not like in the last 2 campaigns. I'm a big believer in electing people in most situations. But I will tell you, and much to the chagrin of Badger sheriffs, I think a lot of these local elected positions need to come into the 21st century so that they become much more effective and much more efficient. I'm just real reluctant to hop on the bandwagon though, because there is still in me this control of with my vote to have an impact on things. So, but I really had a problem with all the negative campaigning in every election. So.
Okay.
Good answer.
Thank you.
We get a second A from Dan.
And it kind of tells me a little bit about, you said you didn't want to comment about the personal reasons for, but I just, Tom, you don't have to say anything, but I just get a sense that negative campaigning was an issue for you.
No.
It wasn't?
No, it's not. No, the shots that I've taken from the newspaper have been deserved, even though I don't always agree they've been deserved. The blogs don't bother me. I don't read Full of Baloney and some of these other ones, but I did read that blog.
Okay.
So.
That was good.
Yeah.
You don't get an A.
Well, no, that was a very good guess, though.
It was. A for effort.
Yes, there you go.
Real quickly, because we're down to like 2 minutes here, Sheriff. There's been a recent proposal for a statewide radio system that would allow law enforcement agencies to communicate with each other during emergency situations. Now, you're opposed to that. There are others throughout the state who are opposed to it. Can you just kind of tell us briefly why?
Okay, I'm not opposed to the statewide system. I'm opposed to the plan that they have in place right now. Currently, the federal dollars are 80% of them are supposed to go back to the local communities. Because of the FCC mandate, we all are going to have to be changing our radio systems. We are going to have to build very robust systems to meet our own county needs. And from my perspective, what should be happening at this point is that money should be coming back to the counties that are building these systems to help defray the cost of building those systems. In addition, the parallel situation that we have with the state is when it comes to data, records checks, we build all these robust systems, and then they created a search engine that allows us all to search that, okay? They can do the same thing with a radio system. The other problem I have with it is the fact that they have not developed any guidelines on how they're going to sustain it. That always makes me nervous when I don't know how I'm going to pay for it in the long haul. Last but not least, they want to do it in VHF, and they want to use the infrastructure that is currently owned by the State Patrol and the DNR. From my perspective, VHS is a problem because getting frequencies up for VHF is very difficult. So really what it boils down to is I don't think they're going to be able to find the frequencies throughout the state to meet that need. I believe that if and just let me add one other thing. I do not recall since the sturgeon spearing, since the spearing issues back in the late 70s, I do not recall Winnebago County ever going outside of adjacent counties to provide any help. So from my perspective, if you want to have a great interoperability, radio operability, you need to encourage robust regional systems, and then you need to tie them together. And that's not what they want to do.
Okay, all right. Real quickly, when is your term up?
January 2nd of 2011.
Okay. We're going to have you back on before.
I look forward to coming back on. I enjoy coming in.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks very much for being here.
Yeah.
As always, thanks to Dan, the crew, and to you at home. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
I will tell you, yeah.